This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Benerofe, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And me, Peter Katz, formerly with NBC, ABC News, and stations from Boston to Los Angeles. White Plains Week, what's happening, who are the newsmakers, what's in store for the future. The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. White Plains, Westchester, and the world. John Bailey, White Plains Week. And I'm joined, of course, by Jim Benerofe, the Dean of the School of Journalism for the City of White Plains, New York, USA, and a special guest today, Bob Marone of Radio WVOX. He is the morning man. You hear him every morning, 6 to 9.
6 to 9 or 10, depending
6 to 9
on the
or
day.
10, depending on what he feels like, right?
No,
Exactly.
depending on whether or not we do an overtime calling.
That's right. And he is here because, as we know, this was a special week. Jim, the headlines.
Okay, and here are the headlines for the week of September 14th, 2018. The nation reflects on the 17th year since the attack on the World Trade Center killed over 3,000 people. Symposium held in Brooklyn to discuss our emergency preparedness now. Governor Andrew M. Cuomo wins the New York gubernatorial race by a 2-to-1 margin over Cynthia Nixon. Andrea Stewart Cousins overwhelms challenger legislator Virginia Perez in the right to the nomination for the 35th Senate District. Tappan Zee Bridge eastbound span opens and there is traffic on the bridge, ladies and gentlemen. Aetna and Montefiore settle their dispute over coverage but do not disclose terms. Superintendents, cleaners, porters, and workers in 500 residential buildings in Westchester vote to strike as talks show no movement. President Trump has a compassionate week, but meanwhile his EPA agency cuts methane release rules and he disputes toll of 3,000 dead in Puerto Rico. Florence continues to lash North and South Carolina with torrential rains.
Thank you, Jim. And we turn now to something that was on our minds this week, and that was, of course, 9/11, the 17th anniversary. Jim, your impressions that day and now?
Well, it's always, I would say, a momentously moving day. I recently visited the 9/11 Memorial Museum, and it still takes a long time to get over this. It's very tough stuff.
It is. Bob, you were actually very personally involved that day, and you were frustrated that you couldn't.
Very frustrated, yeah. I had been the head of business resumption planning and disaster planning for Merrill Lynch in the New York area at that time. And it just so happened I had taken a leave of absence to have some surgery done, literally 2 days before. So fly out west, I think I'm about to enjoy a vacation, and this happens. Now, two things. One, the frustration of not being able to get back, although I had a terrific deputy, I mean, she's more than able, but not being able to get back, number one, because the history of that building, and quite frankly, when we would meet, private sector takes these things seriously, because when the infrastructure goes down, Wall Street goes down, the economy goes down. So we had really regular meetings and very rigorous plans. That's one of the reasons why all the Wall Street firms recovered so quickly. But that aside, we would actually start meetings almost jocularly saying, all right, what are we going to do when they get that building down the street? Because because we knew that the World Trade Center was a target. We knew that we in the World Financial Center and across the street, One Liberty Plaza, we knew we were targets. So that was the thought. So I was not at all, one of the few people you meet wasn't surprised at the event. I was surprised at the extent of it. I was surprised at the success of it. But for me, having gone out on medical leave, I went back for a couple of days to supervise things, and then I went back on leave. And I was also at a point in my time where I was in the transitioning from corporate communications to radio. So it was a rather painful, quite frankly, a painful transition, because I'm watching television and I'm watching a building that I was literally going to teach in that day. I would not have been hurt. I mean, it's not a sob story. Everyone in that building got out okay, but I was teaching a class for the New York Institute of Finance on the 17th floor. I got someone else to do it for me. But I had an office in the World Fi, I had an office in One Liberty Plaza. And I got off at that Cortlandt Street subway every day for 20 years. So to watch all this fall down, when I was in school, I worked down there. After I graduated, I worked down there. So all my working life was collapsing in front of my eyes. But the other thing, though, and I need to say this or I'd be intellectually dishonest, I've been disappointed at the country's response. And I've said that on my show many times. Militarily, or not militarily, but from the standpoint of Homeland Security, all the presidents since then, Bush, Obama, and now Trump, we've not had another serious attack. We've had those little one-offs, and they're to be credited for that. But as far as the population at large and our elected officials, the population has grown very timid, which is a great disappointment to me, and thus so have allowed our elected officials to manipulate them no end. And that has been a part of the attack that has been rather successful on behalf of our enemies. People were afraid for way too long.
That's definitely a very interesting observation.
It really troubles me, because America just really hasn't been attacked in our era.
Yeah, and going to the White Plains Week newsreel March of Time, we'll see the first shot. That is Lower Manhattan, Tuesday morning, shrouded in gloom and fog in the just around high noon. Sort of the weather recognizing the importance of the day. And at Liberty Park, there was a ceremony honoring the citizens in White Plains, 6 of them that were killed that day. This is a shot of the memorial there. And I went to a symposium on that Tuesday afternoon, 9/11, held down in Brooklyn, New York, USA, in which persons involved in that day were describing what happened then, what they think has happened now, and what's ahead. And one of those persons that spoke was Lisa Orloff, who founded the worldcares.org as a result of her experiences that day. Here's what she had to say.
I was really offended. I was offended and I was angry and I was appalled that someone would attack our city and our country. I didn't really know the magnitude of what was happening. But I knew I had to do something. Initially it was to call and care for immediate friends, but then as the day went by, and anybody that's been involved in disaster response knows that one day is worth about a month's worth of activity. I went to St. Vincent's to give blood. The line was wrapped around the corner and there really wasn't a need for blood. I wound up going to Chelsea Piers where I was told that volunteers were being organized. All the while you're walking through people that are walking around in a daze. And I was told to come back and try Jacobs Javits Center. And on September 12th, I ended up at the Jacobs Javits Center, and really within hours was managing 300 people just like me who wanted to be involved. We ran the first supply chain down to ground zero. People would come, they had to be firefighters, iron workers, or medical personnel. personnel. They were being equipped, they were being ran through a very sophisticated ID system where someone would check their ID and then Manhattan South would put a piece of electrical tape on their body with a number. And that's the way they were tracked. We would equip them with what they needed to go down to ground zero, and they went down in school buses. I won't bore you with what happened between then and the closing of the Jacob Javits Center, other than the fact that I was very fortunate to meet the Army National Guard and work with them in learning about the incident command system, how to organize things, why it was important to begin to get people out from the site, during that time, we made a very strong bond with all the other volunteers and official responders. And we soon realized that this willingness to help was taking a horrible toll on everybody involved. And we began to attend FEMA meetings with Marilyn Shigatani and Bernadette Frecker, who are my mentors, encouraged us to incorporate, and we began to assist FEMA in some of the very hyper-local activities, such as some of our volunteers for Chinatown who go and interpret, and various things that New Yorkers knew how to do. Initially, some of our incoming volunteers said, no, we don't need your help, and then they tried to hop on a subway. And we got a little call, wait, I'm sorry, I think I may have misspoke. Do you think you could send some volunteers to help us navigate around the city? We started with that community effort, and then we opened a community center called September Space, which brought together service providers initially to address the mental health needs of the responder community, the mental health needs of the survivors. In the early days, survivors were not allowed to grieve. They were being told that they were the lucky ones, and they had nothing to complain about. And September Space gave them a place to come and a place to connect with what was going on, to deal with their grief, and to have a voice.
When you allow politics to become front and center in the middle of a disaster, then that's a disaster on top of a disaster. And I speak from, representing a United States congressman to a New York State assembly member. I mean, the challenge that I found getting our elected officials to really get serious about what we're sitting here talking about today, it took the Sandy directly at congressional districts, their state assembly districts, their city council districts. It took their constituents who were overbearing in terms of reaching out for assistance. When you have community-based organizations who lack capacity for a time like you experience in disasters, then the failure of that non-existence contributes to the demise of the folks most impacted by it. And then when you decide that you're going to play the political role, well, it's not in my jurisdiction, or it's not in my discipline of government, or we don't have this kind of, and the thing that was so disturbing to me was the Congress appropriated what they call the Disaster Relief Fund to be disseminated in areas that were most impacted to help them to recover. When you witness governmental agencies that use that opportunity to fatten their pockets, and I'm not going to bite my tongue about it because it's just real. It's why it's important that communities take responsibility in the lead
So, as former deputy coordinator of emergency management in the Jersey City area, you feel that women in the community can be much better utilized by officials. Could you elaborate on that?
I sure can. So, considering the fact that women are very much able to multitask in a variety of incidents that go from day-to-day life, we are not being utilized to our fullest extent with our community relationships, our activity within the community, and within our local government.
That was just some of the thoughts from people who were there and who now are say what's wrong with this process now. And I can really identify with that politician's statement that Dr. Edward Williams, who manages emergency management from Far Rockaway, said.
Well, I found that maybe it's my morning talk show host coming out. I found it rich that on one hand he was saying we shouldn't bring politics to it, and then a woman comes on the air telling us how women will be great at this because we multitask.
Yeah.
I think she missed the plot on that. But yes, they, Rahm Emanuel famously said, "Don't waste a crisis," and so politicians did do that.
Yeah.
On that day. But all of those people, as you know, I know the business in which they're engaged. In fact, before I went to Manhattan and did disaster planning there, part of my communications role was to do it in Jersey City for Merrill Lynch's operations there. And you learn the different things. In 1993, you know what we learned? You don't know where an explosion here is going to affect something here. When that explosion went off beneath the World Trade Center, the entire communications hub for Jersey City was lost.
Yes. Wow,
So
I didn't know that.
we didn't know it, realize it either at the time. So Jersey City was terribly impacted by that.
Right. And the woman speaking last was Ida Colin Sanchez.
Good for her.
Now, New York primary results. Good news for Governor Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo, 2-1 margin. Letitia James, his public advocate running mate, defeated Teachout Maloney, Lucia Eve for Attorney General. She faces Keith Wilford in the fall. Kathy Hochul wins Lieutenant Governor nod. Andrea Stewart Cousins wipes out
That
Virginia
wasn't even a
Perez.
race. That was Lions versus Christians. I'm still scratching my head about why Perez ran, but that for another day.
True. And David Carlucci defeated Julie Goldberg in the state Senate 38th district. He faces the very popular Scott Vanderbilt. So that is, he has no easy battle there. And Alessandra Biaggi revives the Biaggi tradition in the Bronx, actually wiping out Jeff Klein.
Do you mind if I comment about that race?
Yeah, sure.
Jeff Klein learned a lesson that leaders have forgotten since time immemorial, and that is when you cease to have power, you cease to have power. Now, when he ran the IDC and he had a Kennedy, as Kennedy did in the Supreme Court, he had this Kennedy-like I can make things happen. He made it easier for the governor to blame the Republicans. He held his Democratic colleagues at bay. And they all pretended and had great respect for him and spoke reverently on the air about him. But off the air, they tell me that he was a Benedict Arnold. And so the minute he didn't have his power, they turned on him like animals in the Serengeti. And justifiably so, I thought.
Jim, your impressions of the results?
Well, I was glad to see that Cuomo won big. I think that Cynthia Nixon would have been a disaster.
Well, too far to the left, in my view.
And no experience. I mean, she had no executive experience, never ran for office. That was just, I think we really got to pass a law that governors and presidents.
Oh, you'll never be able to do that.
No,
but I hear you.
Where are they
but
going to get the
I'll
candidates?
tell you one thing she did do. I interviewed her yesterday, and I do not agree with a fair number of her extreme policies. But almost everything she called the governor out on was true. And not that I give the governor a pass, but we now have a system where you can't run for office anymore unless during the primaries you pretend to be someone else other than who you are. And so he was an almost to the right politician when he ran the first time, and now no one went further to the left since they first took office than the governor has. So she called him on that, and rightly so. But I agree with you. She's not ready for any office at that time.
Whether or not, I mean, that is quite a margin of victory by the governor. So I don't know if it gives her any political future.
No, I don't think it does.
No, I wouldn't think so either. Now, what does have a future is the new New York Bridge, because now all of it is working. Here's some shots of the traffic this week after the bridge was finally cleared to go, and there's a truck going across the eastbound bridge, and here's another shot from the Rockland side, and that shows you the big curve going up there on the eastbound span in the top of the picture there.
Do you know what I'm afraid of,
What?
John?
What?
That the first time I go to take that bridge, there's still going to be long lines, even now with all those lanes.
Well,
Please, let it be easy.
Well, one of the great task forces that has been so silent at the tasks they're achieving is the Bus Rapid Transit Task
Yeah, we haven't
Force.
heard a lot about that.
We have had nothing about it. And what intrigues me is that, hey, they're supposed to have an express bus service starting sometime
Well, I guess
in the next
guys like
month or
us are
so.
going to have to start asking those questions now that the bridge is up. Hey, how would you like to be the guy or gal that told the governor the other day,
Hey, we
we're
can't do
ready
it."
to make the announcement?
Well, it was a woman, actually.
It was?
I
Yeah.
believe so.
Is she still working there?
Well, after the opening in the morning,
Whoops.
which didn't open,
Whoops.
we don't know.
Everything's ready, Mr. Governor. Don't
But
worry
they
about
had
it.
to inspect that. I mean, when you hear this big boom and the little piece of bridge there
Yeah, the
was
bridge
what's
wasn't going to fall on it, but
stalled
they have
out.
to err on the side of caution, I guess.
Error on the side of caution. Now, at the county center this week, the Service Employees International Union, 32BJ, had a strike vote because they are negotiating with the Building and Realty Institute of Westchester in the Mid-Hudson region. What a long title, short for BRI. And the talks have stalled out. And so they voted overwhelmingly, I am told, to strike. But they are reserving 1 week just before the strike date for the BRI to perhaps change and soften their positions. And if they go out on strike, it'll mean 500 residential buildings will not have the services they're used to.
I saw some news this morning. They may very well be going out on strike, and it
Yes.
will have been their first strike in 30 years, if they do.
Right. Well, that seems to be the hard line that they are meeting now. This union has gotten absolutely no press on their crusades, and County Executive George Latimer is very supportive of their position. So we'll see if the Latimer hand of influence,
The
may
hand
help
of the
their-
wand of
yes, the hand of influence. What is it? There's the
magic
fickle
wand.
finger of Latimer. But this is a problem because this is not the Teamsters, you know.
It's not the
those
Teamsters.
unions of favor who seem to always get what they want, oddly enough. And it would appear to me that this union just gets short shrift.
They may,
because
although
of
I
their
get the
makeup.
sense that they're probably going to get a decent deal because it's been so many years for them. And hopefully, and I love puns, they'll clean up this particular union in the negotiations.
Absolutely, and there was another settlement this week, and that, of course, was the very mysterious Montefiore and Edna dispute.
Yes, that was interesting, wasn't it?
Yes, they have not disclosed the terms. We don't know whether the hospitals have said, all right, we'll shave our rates a little. I doubt that they did that, so that you insurance guys don't have to pay so much. And that is one settlement that should be fully disclosed, because we have to see who's giving.
You may see
something.
that. Yeah, I think if we insist on
should.
it, we'll get it.
But wouldn't, because basically the whole problem with healthcare today is it costs too much. And that is why insurance companies get upset. Is that right? So,
Well, they like that it costs too much so long as they're getting their cut of it.
yes, and Well, look, if
It's like being too skinny or too
well,
rich.
speaking of cuts, when you were in the hospital
Yeah.
and you are visited on rounds by doctors, every time a doctor puts his head in the door and says, "Hey, you look good," and then walks out, he gets paid for that.
Well, now they have this whole thing where
Or
they're
she
getting
gets paid
paid
for it.
if the nurse practitioner sees you. They don't even let you see a doctor anymore. Are you aware of that? You go to most clinics and doctors now, unless you have something that they have been treating you for more or less continuously. And even in those cases, you see a physician's assistant and a receipt.
Well, I'll tell you, in some instances, physicians' assistants are better than
They're
doctors.
actually more thorough and say more. That is very true, and that's a fair statement.
they will
that's a balanced statement.
They were the first responder to blame.
Well, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
They have to be extremely careful.
Well, they're very good, actually. But still, you're just getting
Yeah.
a receipt.
Now, this was a mellow week for President Trump.
You mean-
Very mellow week.
you
Showed
mean-
a compassionate side.
He did the mannequins. You mean in the mannequins?
Well, he did visit the
said there were-
Pennsylvania.
I don't think compassion is one of his fortes.
No,
compassion.
there were not
Enmity.
3,000 dead people. They were sleeping.
Well, it's interesting because at the conference I went, where we showed video from the top of the show, I spoke with a chaplain from who was there at the conference, and she said she had volunteered in Puerto Rico and talked with lots of people, and what's happened is people just died in their homes. They just were discovering them. People were allowed to die in hospitals
They were
rather than
napping.
shipped out. Yeah, but I mean, this, when you think of it, 3,200 dead in Puerto Rico equals the World Trade Center.
Yeah, it was more than the original World Trade Center. The president plays politics with that, and obviously my tongue's in my cheek, and I don't mean to disrespect the dead. It's unfortunate that he made that statement because it's pretty well agreed that 3,000 people died.
And there was no reason for him to comment on it, period.
He could have said something. Here's the look.
He didn't have to.
He needs a speechwriter, you know?
Okay, I'm for
He
sale.
doesn't listen to anybody.
You know, I wrote for guys like him back in the day, and you really get your arms around them, or they will say something untoward because they don't get. And there's this thing when you write a speech for someone, you're an instrument to deliver the message you set out to deliver, and you need to do that. If you want to speak from your gut, that's a different venue at a different time.
Right. And he also had his EPA agency give a good okay to methane, which is the worst gas that can be exposed in to the atmosphere. And he also
You've got it wrong.
What did I do?
Smog has vitamins in it. You didn't get that memo.
no, I did not. I mean, methane. I mean, we were always afraid of lighting up a cigarette near a ball field where there was a methane dump up there.
Well,
you know?
business came first, and I don't agree with, but I understand his position on it. He tends to favor business. That's his wiring.
Well, business will have a lot of profit for a very short period of time.
One suspects.
Well, anyway, this is John Bailey. This has been White Plains Week. We thank Bob Marone
thank you for having
sitting
me.
in today to give us his comments on
Nice to
his
meet you,
Trade Center
denizens of
experience.
television.
So to say. And Peter Katz is on assignment this week. And Jim Benerofe, thank you again for being with us. John Bailey, good night for White Plains Week.
Good night.
This has been White Plains Week, news and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.